The acolyte has shown us thus far that May is willing to do anything the master desires so that she can one day become his apprentice. Her current goals are apparently to kill 4 specific Jedi and in a very specific way directed by the master so that she can prove her worth. But is May a good apprentice to take on for a Sith Lord in the Rule of Two era? It's difficult to exactly say who is and who isn't right to become a Sith Lord, as the criteria changes with each era and with each master, but in the Rule of Two, the bar is much higher than it was in the days of the Old Republic. If only we had some ancient wisdom from an experienced Sith Lord who trained many apprentices in the Rule of Two, we could get a better idea of what makes the perfect apprentice. But wait, we actually do. In the Telos Holocron of Legends, Darth Sidious inserts many of his own entries for the future Sith Lords to learn from. One of these such recordings is his experience and instructions on how to select and train the perfect Sith apprentice. In no other time has this information been more valuable than it is right now with the Acolyte. So let's take a look at what Sidious says you should look for when training your own Sith student. Welcome, Acolytes of the Force, to the archives, and let us begin. Palpatine begins this chapter by impressing the importance of actually having an apprentice in the first place. In Palpatine's words, a master without an apprentice is a master of nothing. The duality between the Sith Lord and his student is one that is greater than the entities of mind and matter. Despite how many apprentices Sidious has had in the past, he advocates for the Rule of Two, believing that neither the master nor the apprentice should ever get in their head that there is a greater strength in the order than exceeds the two of them. For this reason, selecting an apprentice is an arduous process. As Sidious explains, if you fully comprehend how few of trillions of beings in the galaxy of worthy becoming of Sith Lord, then you'd understand how monumental your task of selecting an apprentice is. Interestingly, Sidious doesn't specify what kind of species or type of people to choose from. Even though he is very human-centric, Sidious understands that great power can come from nearly anywhere. His own master was a Moon after all, and his only mistake was revealing too much too soon. As far as walks of life go when concerning the Sith and picking an apprentice, both the aristocratic and impoverished alike have the potential for great darkness and evil. It really depends on what your goals are and what kind of person you want to use to accomplish them. This is what brings us to the most important part of selecting a Sith apprentice, the do's and don'ts of selecting an apprentice for yourself. Palpatine begins by explaining that the common mistake many first-time masters make is believing that it is their job to actually teach their apprentice all they know. This would in fact be a grave error, as once the master bestows all of their knowledge, they no longer remain useful, and their lives are now forfeited. Palpatine makes it very clear a Sith apprentice is supposed to be more like a servant, doing the master's bidding and struggling to acquire scraps of knowledge along the way. Not only will this help prolong the master's lifespan, but it will make the apprentice much stronger in the long run. However, there is a balance. Becoming too cruel to one's apprentice will make you the object of their hatred, and they may lash out before the time is correct. This is why you must always be one step ahead of your protege, and for this very specific requirement, Sidious gives us a fully detailed list of warnings. Let us read directly from his writings. You want someone capable of carrying out your orders, but not someone who has every intention of killing you before you can accomplish your goal. You can expect that your apprentice will come to want your life, for it is only natural for the apprentice to aspire for more. An apprentice should be ambitious, but if your ambition is to live, you must be mindful of them. Choose someone as a successor, and you will inevitably be succeeded. Choose someone hungrier, and you will be devoured. Choose someone quicker, and you won't dodge the blade at your back. Choose someone with more patience, and you won't block the blade at your throat. Choose someone more devious, and you'll hold the blade that kills you. Choose someone more clever, and you will never know your end. This recording was made in the few years following his death on the second Death Star and his resurrection. In this time, Palpatine had the opportunity to reflect on all of his apprentices and morph his own opinion into wise words in a holocron. When looking back on Palpatine's 3 apprentices, it's easy to believe that he broke the Rule of Two, or at least played fast and loose with it. But Sidious himself actually provides an excellent explanation for his many students, that simply being that they were all tools for the ultimate goal. But Palpatine of course made some mistakes with each of them that he corrected with the next. Beginning with Maul, Sidious mentioned that he took inspiration from the Jedi practice of indoctrinating infants. He took Maul practically as a newborn and raised him to hate the Jedi. He even planted many dreams of burning the Jedi Temple to the ground and cultivated a special hatred for the Guardians of Peace. Sidious ensured that Maul had the best training in martial arts and the Sith combative arts. However, he always knew that Maul was nothing more than a tool. You see, Maul was indeed trained in the ways of the Sith, but he was never meant to become a Sith Lord. Sidious only used him as a servant to carry out his bidding while he could remain in the shadows. In the beginning phases of his plan, the Sith were still in the shadows to begin with, so Palpatine needed a covert assassin to carry out clandestine missions for his goals. But once the Jedi discovered Anakin, Palpatine's goals quickly changed, and he sent Maul to rattle the Jedi Order, giving Maul the honor of finally revealing themselves to the Jedi. This was actually quite successful with the death of Qui-Gon Jinn, though it cost Sidious Maul as well. For his next apprentice, Sidious decided a different approach. The problem he felt that he had with Maul was that his hatred was largely manufactured. This perhaps made him weaker than he could have been. All throughout history, the Sith championed the idea of taking in older apprentices, giving them the opportunity for the galaxy to have already wronged them. Cultivating these natural feelings gives a more meaningful and a potent connection to the dark side. When it came to Sidious's own goals, he needed someone who hated the Jedi as much as Maul did. And in his own words, why train an apprentice to hate the Jedi when the Jedi can train them for you? And here enters Dooku. Having met with Dooku many times in more political circumstances, Sidious became interested in making the disillusioned Jedi Master his new Sith apprentice, and the perfect Sith for the next phase of the plan: galactic domination. Sidious mentions that it was refreshingly easy to turn Dooku to the dark side, since he was so willing to in the first place. With Dooku as the figurehead of the Sith spearheading their political goals, he became an invaluable pawn of the Clone Wars era. Then, of course, Dooku had his own entourage of dark acolytes that he trained and used during the war, most notably Ventress. Sidious actually decides to give his opinion on her, and why he didn't decide to use Ventress as a proper apprentice, when he says and wrote this: "If ever there was a Sith aspirant, it was Ventress, but her hatred of the Jedi was so intense that it frequently blinded her and made her tactless. She may have deluded herself into believing that she was Tyrannus' true apprentice, especially after he bestowed upon her a pair of lightsabers that had once belonged to his last Padawan, Kamori Vosa. Perhaps Ventress deserved them, for she was an occasionally capable warrior, but perhaps she was nothing more or nothing less than a warrior. The report of her death hardly came as a surprise to me." Again, it all plays more into the tool of mentality. Dooku had worn out his usefulness as the young Skywalker was ripe for the harvest. Sidious traded up. As for Anakin, Palpatine had done something special. Instead of training him meticulously like Maul, or leave him to his own desires like he did with Dooku, Palpatine struck a balance and did a combination. For over a decade, Palpatine would worm his way to becoming Anakin's friend and confidant. He allowed the Jedi to make their inevitable mistakes and blunders, sparking indignation in the young Skywalker. When all of this happened, Palpatine would fan the flames, hissing in Anakin's ear to inflate his ego or make him feel justified. In this way, he allowed the Jedi to teach Anakin to hate them and help the process along. When the time came, he made sure it was Anakin that ended Dooku's tenure as a Sith apprentice. Even 30 years later, Palpatine recalls his amusement and the look in Dooku's eyes when he was finally betrayed. In later writings, Palpatine would mention that Vader greatly disappointed him after his mutilation at the hands of Kenobi, even though it was Vader that would accomplish Maul's dream of burning down the Jedi Temple, and destroyed everything Dooku built with killing the Confederacy. Anakin ultimately fell short of the potential that Palpatine had in mind for him, and this led to an obsession. Palpatine did not want to settle for anything less than the absolute potential of a Skywalker. He was hooked on the Skywalkers like a drug, and desired to have a perfect apprentice. In Palpatine's own words, Vader remained strong in the Force, but strong enough to succeed me? Never. Granted, he was strong enough to kill me, but that only lasted for so long. It is only appropriate that my next apprentice must be someone with more unique qualities. It must be Luke Skywalker, or his kin. Of course, Palpatine would succeed in his goal during the Dark Empire and Legends, but let's bring this conversation back to where we started, with the acolyte May. With all of the criteria, warnings, and suggestions made from Sidious, do you think that the Master is selecting his apprentice well? Clearly he seems as though he is more hungry, patient, quick, devious, and clever than May is. But more important, can May stack up to what is expected of her as a potential Sith? She needs to prove her abilities in the Force, and as an assassin skill set can only go so far for aspiring Lords of the Sith. But she has something that is holding her back. Her feelings of love and attachment to her sister Osha. If we know anything of the Sith, then we know that Osha needs to be May's final test. The Master will certainly command her to kill her sister to finalize her devotion to the dark side. Otherwise, this would all be a waste of a true Sith Lord's time and talents. But now, my friends, we would love to hear what you think about these instructions on selecting the perfect Sith apprentice from the greatest Sith Lord of all time, Darth Sidious. Did you realize how much planning and meticulous choosing went into deciding who would be the next apprentice? Let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below as we continue to document the Sith moving forward. As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the channel and the archives today, and may the Force be with you always.